So I'm sure many of you have already heard about PlayStation's new subscription model for PlayStation Plus, where they've added additional tiers to add extra value in the hopes of, I guess, competing with Xbox Game Pass, though they've not really said that they're directly trying to compete with that subscription service, but they're both subscriptions that try to give people as much as possible for the monthly payments. So even if PlayStation hasn't directly said we're trying to directly compete with Game Pass, it might as well be a competitor to Game Pass. People are going to be comparing those two. I think if they're making the decision of, do I buy a PlayStation? Do I buy an Xbox? Those subscription services, no doubt, will be a factor in that decision. Now, traditionally, PlayStation's had two subscriptions, one for PlayStation Plus, which is, $60 a year, and it gives you access to a few new games every month, and also gives you access to online functionality and cloud saves. And then they've also had PlayStation Now, which is their cloud streaming service that for some games also allows you to download them and play them locally. PlayStation Now, which costs $60 annually or $10 per month, launched back in 2014. It hasn't really taken off. It's just kind of been coasting by. PlayStation knows this, which is why they have decided to join PlayStation Now and PlayStation Plus into one service through the addition of PlayStation Plus tiers. So this was first reported by Jason Schreier when he hinted at a new subscription service codenamed Spartacus that was impending. This was published on March 25th, 2022. Clicking on the link will take you to the article in question, and you can find all of the details here. But now that we have official confirmation, we don't really need to go through this article. PlayStation itself tweeted on March 29th, 2022, all new PlayStation Plus launches in June with 3 flexible membership options. Clicking on the link will take you to this blog post. All new PlayStation Plus launches in June with 700 plus games and more value than ever. So let's take a look at this offering and see how it compares to Game Pass, because no doubt that comparison will ultimately be made. The blog post reads, this June, we're bringing together PlayStation Plus and PlayStation Now in an all-new PlayStation Plus subscription service that provides more choice to customers across 3 membership tiers globally. You got PlayStation Plus Essential, which is basically stock PlayStation Plus, the PlayStation Plus you've always known. No price changes, $10 monthly to $60 yearly. Same benefits that PlayStation Plus members are getting today. 2 monthly downloadable games, exclusive discounts, cloud storage for save games. Cloud storage for save games should not be locked behind an online subscription. Same goes for Nintendo. Xbox is doing it right. At the very least, cloud saves are just the default feature. And given how important save games are to the functionality of a console and its games, I think that's a key enough feature that I don't think it should be locked behind a paywall. But PlayStation Plus continues to do so. And of course, online multiplayer access. So just the OG PlayStation Plus. Then you got PlayStation Plus Extra, which on top of PlayStation Plus adds a catalog of up to 400 of the most enjoyable PS4 and PS5 games. Games in the Extra tier are downloadable for play. Now this is the tier I can see some people upgrading to because of access to all of these games. And, PS4 is still going strong. Like, it's obviously being phased out for PS5, but it's got plenty of great games, and the user base for it is still, over 100 million. So, PS4 is far from dead currently, and to have access to so many of these games is certainly going to entice some people. That's $15 monthly or $100 yearly. Obviously, if you go for the annual subscription, you're saving quite a bit of money. Games in the Extra tier are downloadable for play. Now, that's important. These games are not just going to be on the cloud. You can play them locally, so, having that option is fantastic. And last but not least, you got PlayStation Plus Premium, which takes all of the benefits from the previous 2 tiers and adds sort of a virtual console-like library of games on top. Classic games adds up to 340 additional games, including, and this is unfortunate, PS3 games available via cloud streaming. So we all know about the architecture of PlayStation 3, how infamous it was, the cell processor, and just how complicated it was to make games for PlayStation 3. It was just such an inelegant architecture that it's been a struggle for PlayStation to emulate or to make things backwards compatible as far as PlayStation 3 titles are concerned. But it's not impossible. I just don't think PlayStation really is prioritizing that aspect, which I think is a shame. But you've got a catalog of classic games available in both streaming and download options from the original PlayStation, PS2, and PSP generations, and also offers cloud streaming access for original PlayStation, PS2, PSP, and PS4 games. Now, I have to wonder, when they say both streaming and download options, does that refer to all of the PS1, PS2, and PSP titles? Or is it that some are stream only and some can be both streamed and downloaded? Is it giving you both options across the board, across all classic games, or are certain classic games restricted to streaming versus some that can do both? Though the pricing isn't necessarily the most enticing, $18 a month, that makes it more expensive than Xbox Game Pass, which offers classic titles, modern titles, and day one launch releases of their first party games. So the value proposition of Game Pass certainly still superior. And then the yearly fee here, $120 a year, is actually no different than if you were to get PlayStation Plus and PlayStation Now, which are both $60 annually separately. So it doesn't feel like you're really getting a whole lot of value, especially if you go for the yearly subscription model, or not as much as like Game Pass. I'm not saying this isn't, worth it for some people. I think some people would happily pay this fee, which is, two $60 games a year for access to all these classic games and access to all these PS4 and PS5 titles. There is, I think, something here for some, but it's just, in the landscape of, you got Game Pass here, that's the pinnacle of subscription value in the gaming landscape. PlayStation Plus, all these tiers by comparison, don't feel like they're quite up to snuff. Now, one of these tiers offered first-party game releases on day one, then that would be something, but PlayStation's Jim Ryan explained in an interview with Games Industry here that that's not going to be the case. Unlike Game Pass, first-party titles are not going to be out on day one and accessible for subscribers, and he sort of tried to explain why here in this article. What doesn't include, says the article, are new first-party games that launch in service at the same time as they come out at retail. Jim Ryan explained as follows: "We feel like we're in a good virtuous cycle with the studios where the investment delivers success, which enables yet more investment, which delivers yet more success. We like that cycle, and we think our games like that cycle. In terms of putting our own games into the service or any of our services upon their release, as you well know, this is not a road that we have gone down in the past, and it's not a road that we're going to go down with this new service. We feel if we were to do that with the games that we make at PlayStation Studios, that virtuous cycle will be broken." Basically saying the return we'd get out of doing first-party games releasing on day one on these subscription services would not be financially beneficial enough to be worth it. It would diminish how much we can invest in these first-party titles, is what he's saying. The level of investment that we need to make in our studios would not be possible, and we think the knock-on effect on the quality of the games that we make would not be something that gamers want. It's certainly the less safe approach. Microsoft can weather the initial period of, having to build up a subscriber base before actually making a profit and not losing money on such a subscription service, because Microsoft is such a rich company. They're one of the top in the world. I think they're a $1 trillion company at this point. They bought Activision Blizzard for dozens of billions of dollars, almost $70 billion. So Microsoft has the cash, whereas PlayStation is a smaller company, still a big corporation, but definitely a lot smaller compared to Microsoft. So they have to be a bit more careful about risk assessment. And I guess PlayStation believes that going down the route of relying too much on subscription and making first-party games available there might yield returns in investment that are not as good as the safer route of releasing first-party games, as they've always been doing, the traditional way of people having to spend $60, $70 on them, while also having the subscription on the side that will entice those who maybe want to play catalogs from the past. Though Jim Ryan doesn't rule out the possibility of plans changing down the line, I don't want to cast anything in stone at this stage. All I'm talking to today is the approach we're taking in the short term. The way our publishing model works right now, it doesn't make any sense, but things can change very quickly in this industry, as we all know. Indeed, hell, I mean, the only reason PlayStation is responding with this new tiered PlayStation Plus subscription is because they're on some level responding to Xbox's Game Pass, and the amount of buzz that subscription model has gained. PlayStation is now sort of trying to boost their own subscription by offering these tiers in the hopes that people see that there's enough value there for them to upgrade. Only time will tell how many people will actually end up upgrading. But it was detailed how they plan to make the game offerings on PlayStation Plus Extra and Premium as compelling as they can. Some popular PS5 titles, including Miles Morales, Spider-Man Miles Morales, and Returnal, are coming to that service, so you don't have to buy those games. If you have the subscriptions, you can have access to them. But outside of its first-party games, Sony says every major publisher is present in the service. So hopefully that means a decent amount of variety of titles that'll be accessible, whether it's indies, whether it's big games, or things that celebrate our heritage, all sorts of games. Ryan says we're going to have all of it, and hopefully a lineup that ticks all sorts of boxes. It's certainly a sizable amount of titles, 700 plus titles across all generations of PlayStation, but it'll be a matter of when this service actually launches and people testing out what's downloadable, what's streamable, and just what titles are actually available. I think that's what's going to ultimately define how much value people ultimately find in all of this. But Jim Ryan's hoping that this serves as an opportunity for, even if this doesn't join a whole lot of new subscribers, existing subscribers, he hopes, which amount to roughly 48 million PlayStation Plus subscribers. Some of them will shift to extra or to premium subscription, and that will just rake them more money every month, every year. Now, there are a number of opinions and reactions to all of this. It's been something of a mixed bag. I feel like generally it feels like a lot of people are not finding this tiered subscription of PlayStation Plus to offer enough value for many to upgrade. One of the complaints is that first-party games are not coming to this service, which makes it just not as compelling as something like Game Pass. And there are folks like Twitter user GameOver30 here who argue that while PlayStation claims that they cannot get back enough of their investment if they were to release first-party games through subscription, to allow for that cycle of investing in games that lead to successful releases, that lead to more investment to continue. GameOver30 says that subscription is actually the most profitable. He says that the hot takes that say PlayStation can't put their games day and date on a service because they need to sell copies to generate revenue are grossly ill-informed about subscriptions, margins, and service revenue operations. The argument further goes out the window when one simply proposes Sony had one more tier called Extra Premium Max, which commanded a fee of $18 to $22, for example. While that sounds ridiculous, it could have been a platform for Sony to measure acceptance at that level. So he's basically saying that he believes that Sony could have gone away with one more tier, one that's a little higher price, but that one, the highest level, actually does offer the first-party releases, and it would be more expensive than the $15 a month for Xbox Game Pass, unless with the annual PlayStation Plus subscription for this, hypothetical Extra Premium Max tier, unless that would have been cheaper, with the annual purchase for the subscription. But, some people might deem it worth the few extra bucks a month if it means gaining access to these incredible AAA game releases from PlayStation. I mean, they're industry leading as far as some of their first party releases go. So I think, maybe people will be willing to pay a little more than Xbox Game Pass for the ability to just have access to PlayStation first-party releases without having to pay $60 to $70 for each of them. Instead, being able to pay, $20 a month or so to be able to play games like God of War Ragnarok on day one without having to pay $60. For those who want to go that route as an additional option, for those who do want to own the game and purchase it traditionally, they can do that too. Similar model to Game Pass, which is just an option to the traditional games purchases. But yeah, this user says the idea that Sony can't fund their games without traditional sales is simply incorrect. The reason Sony didn't place day one PlayStation games on the service is because they have no faith in the upper tiers. Those tiers are heavy margin plays for the most dedicated fans. They didn't use the upper tiers of PlayStation Plus to expand the business or even drive a bigger subscriber base for that matter. The upper tiers of PlayStation Plus are a heavy margin play for cost of products that are already absorbed by current business revenue. I can't really blame them for driving a higher margin model. That's how you make money. I get it. The challenge for Sony longer term is adapting to market and consumer preferences. They've slowly accepted PC, but it's going to take longer in the subscription realm. Apparently, the traditional sales model will never change. The model will always exist. Driving revenue through alternate models should always be on the table, assuming it doesn't have severe cost or market restrictions. Sony and Nintendo are a lot alike in their resistance to change. So basically, this user insists Sony just isn't confident enough in the subscription model at higher tiers where they feel like they'll make the money back of the investment they put into projects through the monthly subscriptions. Though I think Xbox over time will prove that wrong more and more, especially when you consider that Xbox Game Pass is gaining on PlayStation Plus pretty quickly. As tweeted here by Roberto Sarano, number of subscribers worldwide of PlayStation Plus and Xbox Game Pass as of January 2022. Look at the growing trend here. PlayStation Plus only increased by 15.6%, whereas Xbox Game Pass within the same time period had a whopping 150% increase, 10 times more. Sony's online service suffered a loss of subscribers between March 21st and December 21st, while Microsoft is always growing. And you can see right here, the blue bar is Microsoft or Game Pass, and then the orange bar, the taller ones, are PlayStation Plus. And starting out, you can see there is much more of a discrepancy, but as time passes, that discrepancy is getting narrower and narrower and narrower. People are really beginning to appreciate the value that Game Pass offers and how it means that for the people who can't afford to spend $60 to $70 on every new game that comes out, they'll have access to those games on day one, plus they'll have access to all these other additional third-party titles that rotate in and out of Game Pass. As for how enthusiasts have reacted to all of this, well, one of the things that they're not happy about is that PlayStation 3 backwards compatibility is still non-existent, and that those games are only accessible via streaming. Here we have Casey Mongillo. I would get this if it weren't cloud-based. Here's somebody else, Uzman, PS3 cloud streaming. Damn, can we get to use our PS3 discs and PS5 or at least allow downloading of PlayStation 3 games? Apparently not, and that's probably the most common complaint I've seen, even more than the fact that you can't access, first-party releases on day one. The fact that backwards compatibility for PlayStation 3, which is a generation that had plenty of great games, that's still a struggle, and it makes, preservation of games and bringing those games into the modern era that more difficult. It's just been frustrating. The fact that PS3 games will be cloud streaming only, aka unchanged from PS Now, shows how little effort Sony's putting into this. PS3 can be easily emulated on PC. There is no excuses here. Now, it's different emulating on PC versus PS5, and I'm sure there are some struggles there because PS3's architecture is just so not intuitive and inefficient and, more difficult to emulate than your average console. But I do not believe for a second that it's an impossible task on Sony's part, who, have the source code. And I think if they put the time and energy into it, they'd be able to achieve this. But either it's taking them longer than, people are hoping, or they're just not working on it enough or at all. They don't seem super interested in PlayStation 3 emulation right now, and it's not something people are happy about, which is why we see tweets like this. PS3 games will be available via stream, and you got the Will Smith slapping Chris Rock meme image here. You've got Destin from IGN saying the PlayStation Plus news is good if you get the mid-tier, but not having downloadable PS3 games is a huge bummer. If it's like PS Now, don't be misled by that 700 plus games claim, because like PS Now, I'd bet 300 plus of them are streamable only, if downloadable at sub in a heartbeat. And Destin also has the suspicion that even for the non-PS3 games that PlayStation claims are either downloadable or streamable, some will only be streamable, others will allow both streaming and downloading. It's not going to be just download everything except for PS3 games. Maybe even some of the classic games will be streaming only. I'm not 100% sure. I'll have to get more assurances on that when the service releases. That's just what Destin is currently assuming, and that's just a possibility that's out there. Here's prominent Twitter user 9volt who said, I do like that the PS3 was so effed up that Sony has given up on figuring out on how to make those games run on modern hardware. Yeah, that's the thing, like, have they given up? Are they not trying? Is it just that hard to get PS3 emulation running on PlayStation 5? Or is it that they don't feel like it's just much of a priority? A whole generation of games relegated to cloud streaming because we can't figure out how to emulate our own console. Essentially, yeah, the long-term ramifications of PlayStation 3's architecture are still felt today, where they really made a mistake and made backwards compatibility that much more difficult. And this is something that John Lindemann from Digital Foundry brings up. Main issue is the SPUs. They'd have to find some way to work around that within the PS5 hardware, as the CPU alone isn't up to the task, I think. Also, RCPS3, which is a PS3 emulator, has been tested on the PS5 CPU. It's not workable there in games with heavy SPU usage. Thus, the need to find another way, which might be feasible, but not easy. Sony's really shot themselves in the foot with this one, and 2 generations after PlayStation 3, we have still not figured out how to get PS3 backwards compatibility up and running without streaming. Now, John Lindemann from Digital Foundry had his own take to give, and he was not particularly amused by the revelation of these PlayStation Plus tiers. He doesn't find the value here to be compelling enough. Is anyone actually interested in this? It was never ever going to be interesting to someone like me, but it seems pretty poor. Streaming PS3 games in particular feels like an insult. Yes, I know they've done that for years, but you know how I feel about streaming. For myself, aside from my distaste for streaming and subs, I already own all of these machines, and likely every game they could offer. Only PS3 would benefit from proper emulation due to poor performance, but that's not even happening. Now, YouTuber Spawnwave did bring up the point that for those who have already been subscribing to PlayStation Now and PlayStation Plus, the added value comes in the fact that with the PlayStation Plus Extra subscription, you also get PS5 games for free as long as you're subscribed. So there is that aspect on top of the fact that you're getting the PS Now Classic games and the PS Plus benefits. But I think it's generally agreed upon that if PS3 games were downloadable and not just streamable, that would potentially change the value proposition here and would make this all a whole lot more compelling. Lance McDonald, a prominent modder, also poked fun at the fact that PS3 emulation, not even Sony seems to be able to work it out, or seem to be trying hard enough to work it out. I can't get over Sony announcing that they have a PS1 and PS2 emulator up and running on PS4 and PS5 hardware, but they're locking both behind a subscription fee and won't let you play discs you already own. Also, they still can't get PS3 emulation on the PS5 running. And yes, indeed, another complaint is what's actually being paywalled on top of basic features like cloud saves. The fact that PS1 and PS2 emulation cannot be utilized to take discs that you already own and use those, or take titles that you've already bought in the past, and for there to be some form of backwards compatibility, and for that to basically be locked behind a subscription fee, through which only then can you actually download these PS1 and PS2 games. It just feels like it's adding salt to injury. It's feeling like people aren't able to get the most out of the stuff that they've already purchased and have to repurchase them, or have to pay extra monthly and recurrently just to be able to play games that they already own on modern hardware that can clearly emulate the games. John Lindemann chimed in here from Digital Foundry. It's super dumb, but sadly, discs are off the table as both systems lack the necessary laser to read CDs. So that's another aspect of it. Unfortunately, PlayStation 5 does not apparently come built in with the ability to read specifically CDs. Like, for example, on this PSU article from January 2021, the question is asked, does PS5 support audio CDs? Apparently, Sony officially confirmed that the PS5 does not support audio CDs, or CDs in general, according to John Lindemann. I'm not 100% sure on this, but even then, the PlayStation 5 does come with USB ports, and you could always just buy a CD reader, plug it in via USB, and then have the games emulated that way. I'm sure that's a possibility, but that's just not an option that currently exists. Lance McDonald concludes by saying that at the end of the day, it's just another look at how awful the value proposition is of buying a PlayStation 5 versus buying a PlayStation 3. If your goal is to play PS3 games, why play them on streaming, which is a very flawed still way of playing games instead of buying a PlayStation 3, buying games for cheap and running the games natively. Here's a tweet that went viral, over 130,000 likes, that makes fun of this situation. $120 a year for classic games and still no native PlayStation 3. Sony be like, PS3 emulation is too hard. My brother in Christ, you made the console. Some folks are also bringing up how the timing of the subscription announcement goes in line with PlayStation's recent attempt to close down the PlayStation 3 store. Here's another take from Lance McDonald. So it becomes pretty obvious that PlayStation wanted to shut down the PS3 store because it already offers almost everything their new PS Plus subscription stuff offers, except without the massive subscription fee. And then he calls out Jim Ryan by stating, seeing Jim Ryan proudly announce that we see a lot of value in charging ongoing fees for stuff we used to give away for free as if he's on our side is the funniest shit. Keep in mind that a lot of people are going to have PlayStation 3 titles that they're inheriting from the PlayStation Plus subscription model, but without the ability to play PS3 games locally on PS5. Those games are best accessible on a PlayStation 3. And then when you shut down the PS3 store, you don't gain access to many of the games that are being sold on that platform. And now they're asking for recurrent fees on a lessened, diminished version of playing PlayStation 3 classics because it's streaming and not local hardware gaming. Fortunately, the PlayStation 3 store's shutdown, as well as the Vita's, was prevented with enough backlash that Sony backed off on this. But buying games on PS3 is not easy right now because so many functionalities have been shut down, and what's left of PS3's store and Vita store is very bare bones, but you can still buy and download games to a degree. So yeah, with all said and done, again, the reception so far seems fairly mixed, leaning, I'd say, towards more negative and more pessimistic. For my part, I feel like there will be folks who will be enticed by some of these PlayStation Plus tiers with extra offering so many games for PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. I think the extra might be worthwhile for a lot of folks, but the PlayStation Plus Premium without PlayStation 3 native support capabilities, it becomes harder to justify paying $18 a month or $120 a year. Though for those who missed out on a lot of PS1, PS2, and PSP games and just want a convenient way to access all of those games via streaming and or download, then Plus Premium for this fee might be worth it for you if you play these games enough where you get a lot of value. For my part, depending on the offering of PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 games, I may upgrade to Plus Extra. That's about as high as I'll go. And even then, that's a maybe. Plus Premium just doesn't quite do enough for me. PlayStation 3 native support, that would have made all the difference in the world. But without that, I can't quite justify having to spend money for classics that I already own. But again, for those who don't own the vast majority of games from classic PlayStation consoles, maybe they'll find the value in this. With all said and done, I don't think the introduction of these PlayStation Plus tiers is going to set the world on fire. I don't think the offerings are the most compelling, but it's also not like the worst thing in the world. It's very middle of the ground for me, my reaction to this. It's nowhere close to Game Pass, but for those who do partake in the PlayStation platform and don't have the money to spend on individual games, there's still some value to be found here, but at the end of the day, PlayStation games will only come on PlayStation, and the quality of those games, I think, ultimately will still carry the sales of this platform and people subscribing to services like PlayStation Plus. The games will ultimately speak for themselves and will speak the loudest, but, at the same time, when people are making a decision about, do I get an Xbox or PlayStation, stuff like this could end up being a factor. And if looking at the subscription services alone, I think Xbox Game Pass shouldn't be worried about these PlayStation Plus tiers. Though, as time passes, who knows, maybe we'll see the PlayStation Plus tiers be upgraded. Maybe one day we'll see PlayStation 3 emulation. Maybe one day PlayStation will start offering day one releases for PlayStation Plus of their first-party games. But it would seem as though that's probably some ways away. But until then, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on the new PlayStation Plus tiers. Are you gonna upgrade? Do you think there is some value here for you? Are you kind of in the middle of the fence where, you know, you feel kind of about it? Or are you just flat out like, this is just really bad, awful value, the prices and what it offers just nowhere good enough to be a good subscription? Share your thoughts on all of this in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.